We took a break because she wanted to be alone. It turned out that she was not alone at all and was with this person before the break. I don't know what hit me harder, the fact that she lied straight to my face or the picture that proved it. There she was, in the background of some guy's Instagram post, laughing at a rooftop bar in LA. The same LA trip she swore she was taking alone to figure things out. The same break she told me would help us. She wasn't figuring things out. She was with him. And the worst part? She had been with him before she even asked for the break. Looking back, the signs were obvious. Before she went to LA with her friends, everything between us seemed normal. We had been together for 2 years, and while we had our disagreements, nothing ever felt serious enough to threaten our relationship. But after that trip, things changed. She became distant, less present when we were together. At first, it was small things, delayed replies, less enthusiasm in her voice, moments where she seemed distracted by something else. She canceled plans more often, saying she was tired or just wanted to be alone. Our late-night conversations, which used to be effortless, became short and filled with pauses. She spent more time on her phone. When we went out, she kept checking it, smiling at messages she never shared. When I noticed how different she was acting, I tried to push the thought away. I told myself she was just stressed, that everyone goes through phases where they need more space. But it wasn't just space. She was pulling away completely. Physical affection faded next. She stopped reaching for my hand, stopped leaning into me when we sat together. The small moments of closeness that had once been second nature disappeared one by one. When she started avoiding intimacy altogether, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Eventually, she told me she needed a break. She said she wasn't sure why she felt this way, but she wanted time apart to figure things out. She insisted that it wasn't a breakup, just a pause to clear her head. She said she needed to be alone. I didn't like it, but I agreed, thinking it was something we could work through. I spent the next few days convincing myself that this would make things better, that time apart would help her miss me, help her realize what we had. What I didn't know was that she had already made up her mind. And she wasn't alone at all. The first few days of the break were unbearable. The silence felt heavier than I expected. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her to reach out, but she never did. I told myself not to text her first, that I needed to respect the space she asked for, but the longer I waited, the more it felt like she was slipping away completely. I tried to distract myself, hanging out with friends, throwing myself into work, going to the gym more, but nothing helped. Everywhere I went, I was reminded of her. Every song, every place we used to go, every moment of downtime made my mind drift back to her. Meanwhile, she had gone back to LA. This time, she went alone. That detail stuck with me. The first trip was with friends, a fun getaway. This time, it was just her. She said she needed space, and I assumed she wanted to be alone to think, to process, maybe even to miss me. But as the days passed, something about it started to feel off. Her social media went quiet. No updates, no stories, nothing. It was strange because even when she was busy, she would usually post something, a picture of her food, a random thought, a sunset. But this time, it was like she had disappeared. A week into the break, I finally gave in and checked her Instagram. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to see if she had posted anything at all. Maybe a hint about what she was doing, how she was feeling. But when I got to her profile, I found nothing. No new posts, no new stories. The only change was a new following, someone I didn't recognize. Curious, I clicked on the profile. It belonged to a guy. His page was full of pictures of LA, restaurants, nightclubs, scenic spots. I scrolled through out of curiosity, trying to figure out who he was, wondering if he was just some random person she had met. And then I saw it, that a picture of him at a rooftop bar, drink in hand, smiling at the camera. It wasn't him I was focused on, though. It was the background. There she was, my girlfriend, the one who needed space, the one who went to LA alone. Except she wasn't alone at all. And the worst part? The timestamp on the photo. It was from a few weeks ago. She had been with him before we took the break. Everything clicked at once. The distance, the coldness, the lack of affection. She hadn't been confused. She hadn't needed time to think. She had been planning this all along. The break wasn't about figuring things out. It was about clearing her conscience before running to someone else. Staring at that picture, everything I had been trying to ignore became painfully clear. The timeline didn't lie. She had been with him before she asked for space. The so-called break was never about us. It was about making it easier for her to be with him without technically cheating. A sinking feeling settled in my chest as I scrolled further through his profile. There were more pictures. Some of places I knew she had been during her last LA trip, even a few from before she officially asked for the break. In most of them, she wasn't in the frame, but I recognized the locations. The restaurant she had mentioned, the beach she had posted about, the hotel lobby that looked oddly familiar. She had never told me who she was with during that first trip, and I never thought to ask. I trusted her. And now, I was realizing that I had been left completely in the dark while she built something with someone else. The more I looked, the angrier I became. I replayed our last conversation in my head. The way she had insisted she needed time alone. The way she assured me it had nothing to do with anyone else. She made me believe that this was something we were going through together, that she just needed to clear her mind, that we still had a future. She had looked me in the eye and lied. The worst part was how easily she had done it. No hesitation, no guilt, just a carefully planned exit while she lined up someone else. I thought about all the nights I had spent agonizing over what I could have done differently. The way I blamed myself for the distance, wondering if I had done something wrong, if I hadn't been supportive enough. Meanwhile, she had already moved on before I even knew we had a problem. I put my phone down, my hands shaking with anger. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't something that had just happened. She had chosen this. She had chosen to betray me, to manipulate me, to make me believe I had a say in something that had been decided long before. For the first time since she asked for the break, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt done after seeing those pictures. Everything inside me shifted. The sadness, the confusion, the hope that maybe this break would lead us back to each other. It all vanished. It was replaced by something colder. Not just anger, but clarity. She wasn't coming back to fix things. She had already moved on before she even let me go. But I didn't text her. I didn't call. I didn't ask for an explanation, because I didn't need one. Instead, I waited out a week later. She came back and I knew she was home because she texted me like nothing had happened. Just a casual message, something along the lines of, "Hey, can we talk?" Like I had just been sitting around, waiting for her return, ready to pick up where we left off. I didn't reply right away. I let her sit with it. If she was expecting me to be desperate, she was about to be disappointed. Later that night, she showed up at my place. I heard the knock on my door and for a second, I just stood there, staring at it. A week ago, I would have rushed to open it. But now, knowing everything I knew, I felt nothing. I opened the door to find her standing there with that familiar, slightly nervous look. The same one she always had when she thought I might be upset about something. She smiled softly, like this was just another conversation we needed to have. Like she hadn't just spent weeks with someone else. I didn't smile back. Instead, I stepped aside, letting her in without a word. She walked in like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spent weeks pretending to be alone while she was with someone else. Like she hadn't lied straight to my face. She sat down on my couch, tucking her hair behind her ear the way she always did when she was about to say something serious. I stayed standing. She started with small talk, asking how I was, saying she missed me, saying she had been thinking about us a lot. It was almost impressive how smoothly she eased into it. Like this was just another bump in the road. I let her talk. She said the break had given her clarity, that she realized she did want to be with me, that she just needed time to figure things out. I still didn't say a word. Then came the part one was waiting for. She mentioned LA. She said she spent most of the time alone, reflecting, working through her thoughts. I nodded, pretending to listen, but inside, I was waiting for her to slip up, and she did. She said she barely talked to anyone while she was there, that it had really been just her, focusing on herself. That was it. That was the moment I knew she was going to lie to my face until the very end. I pulled out my phone, opened Instagram, and brought up the picture, the one where she was laughing in the background at the rooftop bar. I turned the screen toward her. She stopped talking instantly. Her face changed in a split second, like she had been caught mid-act and was trying to figure out how to recover. I finally spoke. "You weren't alone." She blinked, processing. Then, instead of owning up to it, she went for the next predictable move. She told me it wasn't what it looked like. She stared at the picture, her face frozen for a moment before she quickly tried to regain control. She shook her head and told me I was misunderstanding, that the guy was just a friend she had met through someone else, that nothing had happened, that I was reading too much into it, that I didn't react. I just waited, because I knew what was coming next. She kept talking, trying to spin the situation in every possible way that didn't make her look guilty. She said she had needed space, but that didn't mean she was with someone else. She insisted that she never crossed any lines, that the break was real, that she just happened to meet new people while she was in LA. But I had already scrolled through his profile. I had already done the math, the timestamps, the locations, the way she had gone cold before the break even started. I knew the truth. And the more she talked, the more desperate she sounded. Her voice got softer, more emotional. She said she regretted asking for space. She said she missed me, that she didn't want to throw away what we had. But I wasn't falling for it. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was only sorry she got caught. I took my phone back, locked the screen, and exhaled. Then, calmly, I told her we were done. She didn't take it well. At first, she sat there in silence, like she hadn't fully processed what I had just said. Then she started bargaining. She said we could fix this, that every couple goes through rough patches, that the break was never meant to be permanent. But none of it mattered. I had spent weeks blaming myself, wondering what I did wrong, thinking maybe I hadn't been enough. Meanwhile, she had already moved on before she even told me she needed space. She told me I was overreacting, that I was throwing away something good over a misunderstanding, that I should at least hear her out. But I had heard enough that I told her I wasn't interested in fixing something that was already broken, that she had made her choice long before she ever asked for a break. Her expression shifted. First, she looked hurt, then defensive, then angry. She told me I was being unfair, that I didn't understand, that I was just looking for a reason to end things because I couldn't handle the idea of her figuring herself out. That was when I realized how deep her selfishness ran. She still thought this was about her. She still thought she had control over the situation, that she could manipulate the narrative to make herself the victim. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. That I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just looked at her and waited. She stared at me for a long time, like she couldn't believe I was actually doing this. Then, slowly, she stood up. She walked to the door, hesitating like she wanted to say something else. Maybe one final excuse, one last attempt to change my mind. But she saw the look on my face. She knew it was over. And so, without another word, she walked out. I closed the door behind her and locked it. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again after she left. I just stood there for a while, staring at the closed door. I thought I would feel worse, angry, sad, maybe even regretful. But all I felt was relief. There was no more waiting for her to text back. No more wondering what she was doing or who she was with. No more second-guessing myself, trying to figure out what I could have done differently. The weight I had been carrying for weeks, maybe even months, was finally gone. The next day, I blocked her on everything. No dramatic messages, no parting words, just silence. I didn't need closure because I already had it. The truth had been right in front of me the whole time. I had just refused to see it. I started focusing on myself again. I went back to the gym, reconnected with friends, threw myself into work. At first, it was just a distraction, but eventually, I realized I was actually moving on. A few weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that she had tried to spin the story in her favor, that we had just grown apart, that I had been too distant, that she never actually cheated, that I didn't care, that I knew the truth, and that was enough. Looking back, I don't regret how it ended. I only regret that I didn't see it sooner, that I wasted time trying to fix something that had already been falling apart. But in the end, the breakup wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened for me, because now, I know what I'll never tolerate again. And next time, when I find someone who actually chooses me, I'll know exactly what real love is supposed to feel like.